Given a choice, would you work for Google or Apple? The question got me unaware, and all I could come up with was a very feeble answer. I guess the interviewer wanted to do this after hearing my answer. Impromptu speaking is not easy, not even for the most experienced speakers. To understand why, let's go back to a rather primitive form of communication, the email. Assume you send an email to dtm.rupinder@gmail.com. Your subject line says Apple, but the body of your email shows oranges. Clearly, there is a mismatch between the subject and the body. Does that give you any idea why speeches fail? Just like every email must have a subject, every speech must have a message. Most speeches fail because they deviate from the message, just as ignored emails deviate from their subject. Now, every effective speech follows a BBC structure comprising three sections: the beginning, the body, and the conclusion. Each of these must be aligned to the message. This structure was very well explained centuries ago by the great Greek philosopher Aristotle, who said that there were three steps to telling a story. Step 1, tell them what you're going to tell them. Step 2, tell them. And step 3, tell them what you just told them. Simple, right? In the beginning, you tell them what you're going to tell them. In the body, you tell them. And finally, in the conclusion, you tell them what you just told them. And then tie the beginning, the body, and the conclusion to your message. What can possibly go wrong? A lot, actually. Particularly if you don't focus on the message. When you don't focus on the message, you forget that the subject line is Apple. And when you forget that the subject line is Apple, you sent oranges in the body. The same thing happens in a speech. You're asked to speak about an apple, and instead, you start speaking about an orange. Sometimes you get adventurous. You start with an apple, move on to oranges, and suddenly you are talking about bananas. By the time you have to end, through some convoluted route, you find yourself talking about spinach. Now, I always say that eating spinach will probably make you as strong as Popeye, but it will also get you a girlfriend like Olive. And it will never help you in your argument if you're speaking about apple in the first place. Then there are times when you start with an apple, meander your way to spinach, and then towards the end, you suddenly realize that you have to get back to an apple. So how do you ensure you don't make a salad out of a speech whose topic is apple? The answer lies in a cookie. More specifically, Oreo. This Oreo, while not a cookie, is a wonderful recipe for an impromptu speech. It stands for opinion, reason, example, opinion. So you state an opinion, provide a reason for your opinion, substantiate your reason with examples, and finally restate or summarize your opinion. So if I was asked to speak on an apple, I would say that apple is my favorite fruit. It is my favorite fruit because I can consume an apple in so many different manners. For example, I can have an apple as a diced fruit salad sprinkled with a pinch of salt. or as apple juice, or as an apple pie, or just bite into a ripe, juicy apple. To conclude, apple is my favorite fruit because I can have it in so many different ways. So there you have it. Opinion, reason, example, and opinion. Remember, you can have more than one reasons, but you must provide an example of each. The more reasons you provide, the more solid your opinion becomes. Also, the more examples you give, the more solid your reason becomes. For example, when I spoke about apple, I gave 4 examples. Opinion, reason, example, opinion, and nouns or naming words. Some of us relate to action words or verbs more than we relate to nouns. If you are one of those, then you can remember Oreo as open, resonate, explain, outline. Regardless of how you look at it, Oreo is a very effective manner of impromptu responses. How does Oreo correspond to what our friend Aristotle said many years ago? Well, the O corresponds to the beginning, or tell them what you're going to tell them. The R and the E together correspond to the body, or the part where you tell them. And the closing O corresponds to the conclusion, where you tell them what you just told them. And while you're doing all this, don't forget the message. Oreo requires practice. I have practiced it for so long that I can literally do an Oreo in my sleep. If everything fails, use the following structure. Start your argument with, in my opinion, and then go on to state your opinion. Then say, the reason I say so is because, and provide your reason or resonate. Then provide your examples with the sentence, for example. And finally, conclude your argument by saying, summing up and outlining what you just said. The Oreo approach is quite versatile, and it can be used in a variety of situations, such as speaking impromptu, answering interview questions, participating in group discussions, elevator pitches, putting across a point, negotiating the best outcome, or making a choice. Now that you know about Oreo, you can probably answer these questions. Tell me something about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What is your greatest strength or weakness? Why should I hire you? Why did you choose this organization? Well, answering interview questions such as these just became that much easier, didn't it? Speaking of interview questions, how do you think I would now answer, given a choice, would you like to work for Google or Apple? The answer is that I can answer it in multiple ways. I could say that I want to work for Google because, and provide an Oreo approach. Or I could say, I want to work for Apple because, and still provide an Oreo approach. I can also say that I want to work for both of them and still provide an Oreo approach. Or I could say that I am an entrepreneur and I don't want to work for either of them and still provide an Oreo approach. I hope this was helpful. I also hope that you are now more confident about facing impromptu questions. Should you need more information, please don't hesitate to reach out using the contact details shown. Impromptu speaking is a skill that is not easily mastered by the most experienced of speakers. The Oreo approach provides a reliable way of addressing impromptu speeches. And not just impromptu speeches. Once you start working on impromptu speeches, you will find that you respond to impromptu situations as well. The unknowns of life as we know them. But that is a learning for another time. Thank you for being such a patient audience.